Monday, September 12th, and I would like to call to order the Select Board meeting for this evening. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, on June 16th, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain provisions, the COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order. Thus, this meeting, the September 12th, 2022 Select Board meeting, will be conducted via remote participation by the board. And I'm going to grant Westwood Media permission to record the meeting and just inquire if there is anyone else wishing to record the meeting. Please raise your hand if that is the case. Seeing none, I'm going to jump right into the chair's update. And I'm going to start with the fact that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Now, cancer is a horrible and life-changing event for anyone, but it carries extra sting when the diagnosis is given to a pediatric patient, as was likely done some 43 times just today. Now, we're incredibly fortunate to have world-renowned physicians, surgeons, nursing staff in the greater Boston area, some of whom even call Westwood home. We have world-class facilities such as Children's Hospital, Dana-Farber, Mass General Brigham, all there for families when a family member is afflicted. So it was appropriate that today, President Biden came to Boston on the anniversary of John Kennedy's address challenging us to take a shot at the moon, to deliver his own moonshot address to end the scourge of cancer. Now, there's many ways, from the Jimmy Fund, the American Cancer Society, St. Jude's, and countless others, to make a donation. Or you can simply check on a neighbor who might be going through treatment to see how a helping hand, a ride, a meal might be of assistance. We'll hear later on tonight from one of these world-class organizations. And now, speaking of lending a hand, it's never too late. Westwood Day is fast approaching. And as the saying goes, many hands make light work. So if you'd like to volunteer, please head over to www.westwoodday.org and sign up. I'm sure they would welcome some additional hands. The slate of activities this weekend starts on Friday night, when the Westwood High football team will be taking on Bellingham at Flay High Field at 7 p.m. And there will be fireworks following the game. Then on Saturday, we have a 9 a.m. 5K run, followed by a 10 a.m. fun run. And from 10 to 3, the vendor village and food court will be open. There'll be a number of activities, from inflatables to the fire department demo, a police department demo, pumpkin decorating, a roaming railroad, touch a truck, line dancing, Jumbo Connect 4, and many more. So we hope to see everybody out there. I believe we have good weather lined up. We hope to have a great turnout as well. Moving to scheduled action.
Mr. Chair, may I just mention two things?
You may.
I do apologize. I want to acknowledge the members of the Westwood team, the employees, for their professionalism, the high quality of service. And at this time, I want to acknowledge two specific team members. Many of you are already aware of Dottie Powers receiving the Massachusetts Clerk of the Year Award. But back at the end of August, Jimmy McCarthy of our facilities department, he received the Professional Manager of the Year Award for Facilities and Grounds. And this is a national award acknowledging his service, his professionalism. I just want to share that with the board and the residents, and thank Jimmy for his service.
Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you to both Jimmy and Dottie for all that you do on behalf of the community. Those awards were well-deserved. Moving into scheduled action, we have the St. Mark's Greek Fest, and I believe we have some folks here for that. Nora, do you want to take us through what we have in front of us tonight?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So it's that time of year again. We're all getting ready for the Greek Fest, a wonderful Westwood activity that we have every year. It is planned for Saturday, September 24th and Sunday, September 25th. Saturday, it will run from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sunday from 12 noon until 7 p.m. The Father George is here to answer any questions you might have. The plan is to request a one-day liquor license, which actually is 2 days in this case, and to have it run enough time for the setup and the removal before the event, removal of alcohol after the event. So we're requesting the license be issued from Friday, September 23rd at noon and run through Monday, September 26th at 2 p.m. This is very similar to what's been done in past years. The event is similar to past years. If you haven't been there, it's absolutely worth a visit. Live music, dance performances, there's a vendor village, great food, and they also have wine and beer. They will get a permit for their usual tent. It's a 40 by 140 foot tent that is set up on the property, and that covers the food and drink service as well as the table areas. There's a designated bar area with tip certified servers. But they've been doing this for several years now. I think 5, but I'll defer to Father George on that. And it's always gone off without a hitch. Parking is at Westwood High School. There's an agreement in place with Westwood High School for that. And there's already been a police detail scheduled to assist with pedestrians coming from the high school to St. Mark's. So the Alcohol Review Committee reviewed the application and recommended unanimous approval by the Select Board.
Thank you very much, Nora. I'll turn to my colleagues to see if any of either of you have any questions.
Marianne?
No questions. Looking forward to it.
I have no questions either. I've been there several times, and congratulations, Father George. It is the 5th year, I think, correct? Might be 6. Yes, I think it's the 6th year.
All right. With that, I would entertain a motion.
So I move the Select Board approve St. Mark's Greek Fest 1-day special beer and wine license to serve alcohol on Saturday from 11 to 8 and on Sunday from 12 to 7 p.m.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Father, it looks like you have a great weekend on tap.
Wait, Rob, we have 2 more.
Oh, all right.
2 more parts of the motion. I also move that we approve the time to set up and remove alcohol from the premises from Friday, September 23rd at noon through Monday, September 26th at 2 p.m. pending public safety inspections submitted to the licensing agent.
I second that.
Okay, roll call on part B. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
And I further move that we allow the electronic signature of the Select Board clerk to be affixed to St. Mark's 1-day special beer and wine license.
Okay,
Second that.
very good. Roll call. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well on that. Thank you and good luck. Looks like you've got great weather on tap, so we will see you out there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
Okay, next up, Chief Deckers and our new Assistant Administrator and HR Director Molly Keene are here to give an update on staffing levels to the fire department. So I will turn it over to Chief.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to the Select Board and the Town Administrator for allowing me to be on the agenda this evening. My goal here is to provide you a quick update on fire department staffing and the plans of what you're going to see in the upcoming budget cycle. However, I first want to thank the Select Board and FinCom for your continued support of our fire department's capital budget. The fire department has experienced tremendous financial support over the last several years, which has allowed us to purchase new fire apparatus, fully replace our self-contained breathing apparatus, the ability to purchase 2 full sets of protective gear. That's the fire gear that the firefighters actually wear. And then also the ability to purchase new and replacement extrication equipment. So we have a lot to be thankful for. When it comes to the physical resources, the fire department has everything that we currently require and need to provide extraordinary service. In the area of staffing to meet demand, and based on the 2013 study, the town has added staffing to meet industry best practice and the previous studies commissioned by the town. Those studies specifically looked at addressing staffing versus town growth. We have seen an increase from 30 full-time firefighters assigned to the department in FY13 to having 44 in FY22. Now that's 40 firefighters and 4 administrative personnel, all certified firefighters. So that's a good thing. There are 10 personnel assigned to each working group. Now, a working group is on a daily basis for 24 hours. We will have staffing on shift. On the assigned component, there's 10 per group. The major concern that I'm having right now that I wanted to get across to everyone, even with 10 assigned, by contract, we can reduce that number to 6 personnel on duty. Not 10, but 6 personnel, and that depends on sick leave, vacation leave, and injury. The reason for this reduction, when the system was built, the staffing model was designed with a very strong foundation of a recall system. That recall system is the ability for us to call back off-duty firefighters to support incident needs. Basically, our staffing model was strictly incident volume driven. This system worked really well in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, early 2000s, when the majority of our staff lived in or very close to Westwood. This is not the case today. Today, due to several reasons, primarily family driven, the recall system does not work for timely response back to backfill for demand. It can take 40 minutes to get members back in from home before we can start to respond to the calls that need to get responded to. That's why we rely so heavily on mutual aid from our surrounding partners. So the solution that I'm putting forth, and that I've done so in the past couple of years and we're working towards, the solution is that we look to staff our call volume based on 24/7, 365 without relying on recall. Westwood's call volume does not mirror the national statistics. The national statistics for fire departments that do EMS is normally 80% EMS, 20% fire. But here in Westwood, we're closer to a 65% EMS related calls for service. We also average around 65 fires. Those are brush fires, vehicle fires, and other fires, with 18 significant fires per year. So we need both parts of our organization, EMS and fire. In February of 2018, the fire department introduced our peak and surge level staffing plan. This changed our minimum staffing, as I told you before, which had been by contract 6, to a minimum staffing during the day of 9 members. And we continued at that time with 7 personnel at night, hoping that our recall system would pull in what we needed if we got too busy on the overnight. That didn't work as well as we had expected. After the closing of Norwood Hospital, that was a massive impact to us organizationally. We were sending more ambulances to the city of Boston to deliver critical patients, to where we used to be able to bring them to Norwood Hospital. Now we had to go into the city. So I worked with the town and got them to increase our nighttime membership, our personnel on duty, to 8 members. With the Norwood Hospital closure, there's a tremendous amount of increase in our ambulances time on task or out of service time. I mean, they're in service treating patients, but they're not available to respond here in town. So in the past, we would call people back to staff the additional ambulances that we have. We have 3 ambulances, so we would staff those ambulances accordingly. Though, again, with the recall and everything, that's been hampered. So with the past growth and potential continued growth being discussed in Westwood, the concept of a 24/7, 365 staffing level model is continuing to be reviewed. I would discuss specific numbers. However, these numbers may be needed to be discussed as part of our collective bargaining process, so I can't at this point. So that's the quick down and dirty overview of what's going on. You're going to see, like I did last year, another paper supporting the need to go to, a certain number of staffing, 24/7, 365. But I just wanted to give you just a quick overview of that. I also want to remind all those in attendance tonight that the fire department has been working with the town on staffing. This is evident by the town's continued support of our salary budget. The fire department and the town does not discuss staffing needs via social media. We just won't do that. It's the wrong platform, and there's no way to control misinformation. The information currently being shared on some social media sites is not that of the official town of Westwood social media site, nor that of my sites or my opinions as fire chief. So for the official information, continue to attend select board and FinCom meetings and visit the town's website for more information and our official social media outlets to get general information, but we won't be discussing staffing there. I want to thank you for allowing me to share this update with you. And then I also wanted to let all the select board know that we've formally begun the process of a feasibility study for the replacement of Fire Station 1. The bid presentation is scheduled for tomorrow to bid the feasibility study and hopefully to award that to the contractor. So that's my update for now, and you'll see more of me in the budget process.
Thank you very much, Chief. I will ask Marianne or Michael if they have any questions. I do have one before I turn it over to them, though. You mentioned the social media account that you would like to point people to that's the official, if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
I don't have, the fire department has a Facebook and a Twitter account. I will get the handle and all that and share that with the right individuals to get it out
Very
to the
good.
public.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, any interested resident looking to sign up to follow us on the town's official social media sites can just go to the website under the notify me. They can click on the different social media links that they are interested in following us on, and they can certainly follow us that way.
Thank you, Michael. Chris. Marianne, I saw you coming off mute.
I was going to tell the chief to get on Instagram too. Just a quick question, if I may, Chief, regarding staffing. You talked about staffing it during the day and at night, and what are the current levels of that?
So during the day, 7 days a week from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, we have a minimum staffing of 9 personnel. If all 10 members are there, we would obviously have 10, but we will go down to 9 in that scenario. At nighttime, the minimum staffing is 8. So that's from 6 o'clock at night to 8 a.m. in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And with respect to the feasibility study, I'm glad that process is underway, and I take it you would agree that feasibility as to Fire Station 1 would need to take into account what the staffing levels are now and will likely be in future years.
Yeah, that is part of the RFP that has been presented to the contractors to take a look and build a building that will not only support our needs today, but more importantly, our needs in the future.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Chief, just to help you out, the handle for Twitter is @Westwood Fire.
Thank you.
That's the Twitter handle. Thank you.
Okay, and then Chief, as you're talking about the feasibility study, that would not only include both the number, both current and projected need, but also the composition, as there is a significantly different composition, male and female now, than there was probably when that firehouse was built.
That is a true statement. Part of the RFP is that the building will have a neutral footprint. So proper living facilities that will support all of that.
Great. Okay, well, we look forward to continuing the conversations as we move forward. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening, and thank you to your entire staff for all. I know you've had a busy summer between brush fires and lightning strikes and auto accidents and all kinds of things. So can't ever say enough of what you guys do. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it. And as I've said in the past, we're blessed that we work with so many rock stars. So the town is in good hands, and we're going to continue moving forward and growing the department in the right direction.
Excellent. We look forward to working with you on that. Okay. Next up on the agenda is a discussion of the solar canopy project. And I believe we have both Tom Philbin and Julie Gervais joining us from, Julie's from the Westwood Environmental Action Committee, and Tom is our town sustainability manager who does such a great job in saving us all kinds of money and helping us move towards the Green Community Initiative. So with that, I believe I'll turn it over to, well, let me give a little bit more background. Last Thursday, the school committee approved installation of solar canopies at the Westwood High School parking lot. That was attended by representatives of Amoresco to provide more information to the school committee, and included tonight were background presentations on the initiative from Lema Jean-Baptiste and Tom Philbin. They worked together on that, and the presentation that was given last Thursday. So I will turn it over to Julie and Tom to give us an update.
Particularly, let me thank you again for hearing us. The last time we presented on the solar was in May, and a lot has happened since May. Our phase one, as you all may remember, is a series of rooftops on the high school, Thurston, Martha Jones, and Downey. We are now trying to continue that solar development, and we have a phase two proposal, and that involved the high school parking lot, the Thurston gym roof, the canopies at the Council on Aging, and canopies at the police station and behind Town Hall. The high school parking lot project, though, in particular, is our so-called anchor project because the size of the high school parking lot project is so much bigger than the others that it affects the overall economics of the solar in general, the whole of the phase two itself. So it was very important that we get this high school parking lot project authorized and going forward. We did make a presentation in June to the school committee. We did not get any outright opposition, but there was a lot of concern, and they expressed their concerns. And the material you've seen, there were many questions, and as a result, we ended up preparing probably in excess of 30 pages of answers to the questions and a whole series of other analyses and so forth, trying to get as best we can the most accurate presentation as possible. So with all the board materials, you have now the description of these concerns that were raised, and you have the answers that were given. And as a result of all the feedback that we've gotten, I can summarize what's happened. The canopy array that was at the parking lot was originally over two lots, the faculty and over the student lot. We've moved it entirely over now so that the entire array with the same capacity as before, in fact, slightly higher capacity, is now over on the student side of the parking lot. You should have a rendering of that new layout in your materials. The new rendering, the new layout rather, preserves all of the parking places. It satisfies the concerns of the rec department with regard to Westwood Day and its summer camp. It kept the faculty part open for the high school senior all-night activities and provided a covered sitting area at one end of the parking lot for people who might get watching games on the multi-purpose field. So we thought we covered just about everything we could think of in terms of what was going on. Further, the new design protects the parked vehicles from any kind of weather impact, either from rain or snow. It minimizes the need for snow removal and incorporates a water handling system that prevents any ice formation from water that might spill off the top of the canopies. So every concerned stakeholder that I could identify, for the most part, was solicited for their opinions, and to the extent possible, we tried to include their inputs into the newer design. And the result, as pointed out by Rob moments ago, was a positive vote last Thursday in support of the solar projects by the school committee at the high schools and Thurston facilities. So we are, in response to the school committee, also had a concern with the public outreach, and with the help of WEAC, we have now started that outreach program. WEAC and ourselves, as a minimum, will include a community forum in late September, early October, a series of articles that will be written by WEAC members in local publications and online communications, a booth on Westwood Day, and a recorded presentation that will be put out on Westwood Media. And finally, because of the positive support of the school board, that we are now looking at adding solar at Deerfield and at the new Hanlon. So the phase 2 solar output will total around 1.3 megawatts of capacity and go a long way toward lessening the carbon footprint of Westwood and result in a very significant financial savings and financial future price stability going forward. We can expect as a town somewhere between 20 and 40% of a price increase January 1st of 2027 in our electric rates. And with $1 million bill, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. By doing all of the solar that we're contemplating now, and by increasing the amount of conservation work that we're doing, we will blunt ourselves from eliminating most, if not all, of hopefully of that financial impact, which is coming at us in a few years. So finally, now that we have all these agreements in place, and we have what I consider to be good designs in place, we begin the process of getting a final power purchase agreement, which has to be reviewed by Mr. Hearn and our legal side, get that signed by the committee, and then we begin the process of construction. If everything went perfectly, which won't happen, but if it did, we would have everything constructed probably in the summer of 2023. But given supply constraints for steel, panels, and everything else that we're in the midst of as a nation, this will probably slip to July of 2024. But we are in the process of getting everything else done that we can. The design end will be finalized, the permissions that we need from Eversource, the interconnection agreements, everything like that. And finally, the power purchase agreement and all of that detail will be hopefully nailed down before the end of the year and the first, or latest in the first quarter of next year. So we can look forward to starting the construction probably by the end of the summer at the worst case, and in the best of case at the beginning of the summer. So that's it in a few words or less. And I'm open now to any questions any of you may have on that material.
I'd like to start just by thanking you. I watched the presentation to the school committee the other night, and I thought you all did a marvelous job sort of laying out the case for both where it fits with what we've identified as goals for the town, dating all the way back to 2013 when we voted to pass the green community standards that we're trying to achieve. And I believe where do we stand currently on renewable energy? I believe we're at about 50% of goal. Is that right?
Approximately 52% now. This will bring us up to probably, it depends on, the capacities are going to vary somewhat depending on the final layouts, but we should be in the 75 to 80% range.
Great.
And if we got Hanlon and Deerfield done, which would be another step, that would bring us very close to 90%.
And when you talk about that 20 to 40% increase that you expect on January 1st of 27, you're being a little bit modest there, because I believe we're the beneficiaries of a power purchasing agreement that was signed, and that's what's keeping our rates, suppressed now. But when we come out of the other side of that, that is where that big jump will come from, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, right now we're paying 9.9 cents for supply, and that if you go forward with Constellation, they're predicting 15.4 cents in January 1st of 2027. So we have the 9.9 guaranteed through December 31st, 2026. So we are avoiding a big headache right now that's going to be hitting everybody that doesn't have a fixed price contract like ours.
So we should expect to see you back in front of us in October with the power purchase agreement then?
Yes.
All right, I will just encourage anyone who wants to be more familiar with this to go back to Thursday night's presentation to the school committee. Very comprehensive and thorough. So I want to thank you and Lemma and Mike Bacchus from Amoresco for your participation and your hard work on that. I'll turn it over to Marianne and Michael to see if they have any questions.
I have no questions, but Tom, it's great to see you, and I want to thank you also and congratulate you. I know you've been working on this for a long time, and I'm so thrilled to see that we're taking this step as a town. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Tom, I've been a big fan of these canopies for a long time, since I've seen them about 6 years ago. And so I'm glad that we're finally able to work something out and that they're finally gonna go in. I don't think people understand how much this really helped with the parking lot. And the fact that it's over the field and parents can stay out of the sun while they're watching their kids play soccer is a great addition. So I thank you for your design. I think it's fantastic, and I'm sure it's gonna work out just as we had hoped. So thanks, Tom, for all the hard work, and thank you to the school committee for finally approving it.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
You may.
So Tom has done a fabulous job. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of grants the town has received because of Tom's proactivity and his initiativeness. Also, with the rates that he's talking about, that's saving the town over $100,000 in energy costs. And that was Tom's foresight to bring that to the select board when he did back in December. But I also want to thank Julie and WEAC for their work within the community, their work with Tom on this project and the presentation as we move forward to educate the residents. So thank you both.
And before we leave the topic, I just want to ask Julie, did you want to weigh in anything from the WEAC perspective in support of the project?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled that the school committee voted to support this last week, and WEAC is poised and ready to help Tom with community engagement and outreach. We will be planning to have a community forum. More information will come on that, as well as have some articles in local media. So we look forward to working with Tom on that.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Okay, Tom, Julie, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
You may.
you have a question in the Q&A?
I'm sorry, I'd missed that. I didn't see it pop up. This is from Fran Fusco of 20 Pine Lane. Says, question on the solar. Tim mentioned the new school with solar. Can you clarify where this solar is being planned to go?
The new school is designed to take solar on the roof. The orientation of the building and all of the electrical needs for potentially putting solar on the building is already in the final design. And the building is, of course, a near zero energy building to start with. So this addition would bring it even lower in terms of its energy use per what they call the EUI. It's going to be one of the most efficient schools in the state, and the addition to solar is a perfect example of really getting it down there to where it's requires hardly anything.
Thanks, Tom.
But it's all rooftop.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other questions. Thank you, Mr. Ahern, for alerting me to that. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item. We are joined this evening by some representatives of Dana-Farber Cancer Institute regarding a proposed facility that they'd like to put at University Station. It's a proton therapy facility. We have joining us tonight special counsel Dan Bailey, our town safety consultant, Dr. Cynthia Keppel, who has done extensive work on proton treatment facilities. And we have a number of folks from the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute staff.
And started them in.
Okay, while Tish is letting them in, I would like to turn it to Dan Bailey just to take a few minutes to go through some background on this particular project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. As you said, we're here tonight to hear again from Dana-Farber regarding a proposed proton therapy facility that would be located within the University Station project area. The location would be the last remaining unbuilt parcel on University Avenue, which is about a little over 2-acre parcel on University Avenue, directly on University Avenue, in front of the existing Mass General Brigham Medical Building. Much of what you will hear tonight will be similar to the presentation that Dana-Farber and Dr. Keppel made to the board a little over a year ago. The project itself has not materially changed, but there is a new board member and some time has passed, so it seems that an update was in order. I'm going to give a little bit of background, as you mentioned, in history, just to provide some context. Then Dana-Farber will make a short presentation about the facility. With us from Dana-Farber are Dr. Daphne Haas-Kogan, who is chair of the Department of Radiation Oncology, Dr. Michael Makra-Georges, who is the chief of physics, Gerald Walsh, who is the executive director in the Department of Radiation Oncology, Nicholas Wolf, who is the senior director of business operations affairs, Wendy Gettleman, who is the vice president of facilities management and real estate, Hugh Flaherty, who's the director of business and real estate services, Steve Connaughton, who's the director of construction management, Kevin Kreibel, who's the president of Proton Therapy Partners, and Dana-Farber's outside counsel, Darren Baird at Goulston and Storrs. After Dana-Farber's presentation, there'll be a short presentation by Dr. Keppel. Then Dr. Dana-Farber and Dr. Keppel will take questions from the board and then from the public. I want to give about a 2-minute background on University Station. It's been a while since we've had anything in front of the board, so I just want to rehash. I know this will be repeat for a lot of people, but select board member LeBlanc probably hasn't heard it before, at least not in the context of a select board meeting. The University Station redevelopment began in earnest in 2013 after New England Development and its partners purchased the 130-acre parcel that had been assembled in the mid-2000s by Cabot, and Forbes. The legal relationship between the town, acting through the select board, and the development team has been guided largely by a development agreement that was signed by the select board in 2013 and ratified by town meeting. The development agreement included a long list of commitments by both the town and the developer. Most of those commitments have been fulfilled. One of the few remaining obligations of the developer is a deed restriction that prohibits the developer from selling land to a not-for-profit until the town and the not-for-profit have entered into a payment in lieu of taxes, commonly known as a pilot agreement. The town did a pilot agreement several years ago with Brigham and Women's prior to construction of its facility. Chris Coleman, Nora Loughnane, Pat Ahern, and I have been working with Dana-Farber staff and council for close to 2 years on an acceptable form of pilot agreement for this facility. We were close to an agreement a year ago, but each party was concerned that as structured at that time, the proposed pilot was overly complicated and the amount of pilot payments unpredictable both for the town and for Dana-Farber. Discussions stalled for several months, but we stayed in touch and have been able to reach an agreement in principle that we are currently putting the finishing touches on. That's what I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Otherwise, I'd like to turn it over to Wendy and her team from Dana-Farber.
Dan, thank you so much. Thank you to the select board and to the town administrators. It's our pleasure to be here again. If it's all right, I'm going to share my screen. I think I might need to have that enabled by the host, Tish.
We've been able to enable that, or able to enable.
Should be fine as an attendee. You should be fine.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Andrew, can you as the host?
Sure, let me give it a shot.
Thank you.
I don't see anything on my end.
Wendy, I'm just going to make you the co-host, and I think you'll be able to share the screen as well.
Okay, Andrew, thank you so much.
Andrew, if you have an opportunity, you might want to, ahead of time, also make Dr. Keppel a presenter, because I believe that she will be following.
Sure, I'll do that right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can everybody see the cover sheet? Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to go quickly through a few slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Daphne Haas-Kogan, who I'm so thrilled that she was able to join us. She just left the moonshot presentation with President Biden, so we're thrilled to have her with us today. We've already gone through introductions, so thank you, Dan, for doing that. And just as a refresh for those who were not able to join our presentation last time or are unfamiliar with Dana-Farber, we are thrilled to be celebrating our 75th year as Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, founded by Dr. Sidney Farber. And we are a world leader in both adult and pediatric cancer treatment and research. So there are a number of other facts listed here. I don't need to run through all of them, but it is also important to mention that we do partner with both Brigham and Women's Hospital on our adult patient care, and also with Boston Children's Hospital for our pediatric care. I'm going to turn it over to Daphne to talk a little bit about proton therapy for you.
So first, I do want to echo what Wendy said and the sentiments of the entire Dana-Farber team, how pleased and honored we are to speak to the select board and the town administrators, and how personally honored I feel to be able to speak with you today. I'm usually a pretty calm person, but I'm super jazzed because I just heard about, I was just at the Moonshot event at the JFK Library, and to hear how poised we are to bring the best of medical care to our patients is really why I get up in the morning, and is part of why I'm here to speak with you today. So proton beam radiotherapy is particularly important because whereas the kind of radiation that we give that is standard and we give generally every day goes through and through a body. For example, the reason when you have a chest x-ray, the reason there's an image on the x-ray on the other side of your body is because the x-rays go through and through your body. But when we treat cancer using x-rays, it would be best if the beam went in and then just stopped where the tumor is. So you can see, whereas the yellow beam that just went through goes through the entirety of this young person's brain, the green right there is the proton beam that goes in right to where the brain tumor is and then stops. And it's just so happens that I actually treat children with cancer, children with brain tumors and adults with brain tumors. So this is very, very near and dear to my heart. Next slide. Proton beam radiotherapy actually doesn't cure tumors better than what we call standard radiation or conventional radiation or photon beam radiation, but it can cure patients while potentially the child or the adult with various kinds of cancer incurs many fewer side effects. So whereas a child treated with, or an adult treated for cancer with radiation might have short, medium, and long-term side effects, and I list here only a few, and many organs that are right next to the cancer can be damaged by radiation. Proton beam radiotherapy affords us the possibility of curing that patient and yet giving them a very, very long survival with many, many fewer side effects and better quality of life, which is ultimately what we all want for our patients, and of course, for our loved ones who are who may have cancer. And of course, cancer touches all of us at some point. Okay, Wendy, I think I'm going to hand back to you unless you want, there you go.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Hoskogan. So I thought it would be helpful, this slide was not in our presentation last time, but I thought it would be helpful to really see a cutaway of what does this proton therapy equipment look like. You can see the mass of it, and you can see the gantry on the right here within an envelope of very thick concrete walls. And I thought the most important thing about this to step away from is the relative size to people that you can also see in this diagram, just to give you some idea of how what this equipment looks like. One of the things that we talk a lot about is why do we need proton therapy here? And you can see in this diagram, it's showing that there are a number of centers in the United States, but they only number 40 in the entire United States. And that number has grown by a few, even since the last time we were in front of this board. But it's still very few for as cutting edge as this technology is. And the other thing that's really important to note is that in all of New England, we only have one proton therapy treatment center. And that is why we're so interested in trying to bring that to Westwood. So then the question is, why did we want to put the proton therapy facility in Westwood? And there are a couple of reasons here. Really, it's all about access for anyone in the New England region. There's public transportation right there, proximity to all of the major routes, especially Route 95 directly adjacent, really convenient parking directly adjacent. And then the amenities at Westwood Junction are phenomenal, with the hotels, restaurants, and retail for patients and family members to be able to make it as convenient as possible for them to be able to access this therapy. The next two drawings are conceptual site plans. We have been working on the program of the Proton Therapy Center, but the conceptual plans have not gone further than where they were even a year ago. What you see right here is a drawing that's showing the potential location of the facility. It will be approximately the same height as the building next to it at 80 University Avenue, which is just two-story office building. And you can see the parking to the left of it. So it is sited perpendicular to University Avenue, with the intent for patients and families to access the parking in the building through Bridges Drive and then into the building. And then you can see a sketch of actually where the proton therapy vault would be located in the building. And then this conceptual perspective is just showing if you were accessing the space, what you might see approximately. Again, two-story building surrounded by green space, and also making sure that we have the ability to look at the facade in a creative way, so that you're not feeling that mass of which is the reality of the fact that we have this vault, which will be partially below grade. But again, the entire building would be approximately 2 stories, potentially 2.5. So how long does all this take to build? Well, it takes quite some time. So you can see in this draft planning schedule that we're hoping to acquire the land very quickly. These are calendar years, so we're showing that as soon as possible. With design, as I mentioned, we've already started programming this facility, so design has already started, and we consider this part of our town approval process. So we've also started that as of this evening. DPH and the DON process will follow, and then we will jump right into pre-construction. You can see that we have a lengthy construction period and an even lengthier equipment vendor process. At the end of the constructing the bunker, the vendor will actually be on site installing the equipment and commissioning the equipment for almost a year before we're ready to see patients in the first quarter of 2027. So it is why we are so eager to get started, because it is going to take us so very long to get this up and running for our patients. With that, that is the end of our presentation. I will stop sharing so we can all be on here for questions, and I will open it up.
Okay. thank you both for your presentation. I believe we are going to hear next from Dr. Keppel. And then we'll come back and ask any additional questions that are sort of in totality for the project.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to introduce Dr. Keppel.
You may, sir, please.
Okay. Dr. Cynthia Keppel has held several senior positions related to medical instrumentation and proton therapy. She's the founding partner in K&N Physics Consultant, a professor of radiation oncology at Eastern Virginia Medical School, and the executive director of the Hampton University Proton Therapy Institute. She's worked as a consultant on 17 proton therapy centers in various technical aspects of early stage development. She has her PhD in physics from American University. And we owe her a very big thank you because she is joining us from Cape Town, South Africa, where she is attending the International Nuclear Physics Conference. So Cynthia, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, it is close to 1 a.m. here, so I'm happy to be with you all, but I apologize if I yawn, but it's not that it's boring, it's quite exciting. I'm really excited about this project. So let me try to share my screen here. Can you all see this?
Yes.
You're okay?
We can, yes.
Okay. All right. So Dan went over most of these things. I think I'll just switch along. Probably the most important thing is actually that our consulting company actually has worked on actually more than I could fit on this slide, but I thought I would give you a sampling of some of our clients who we help with various aspects of early stage development and in some parts continued development of over half of the proton therapy centers out there. So we have quite some experience in this field and doing this safely. And I think I'll in the interest of time, go rather quickly and past a few of these slides. Some of these I showed you all last time just to talk about generally the role of proton therapy as compared to other kinds of cancer treatments, but you've heard this now. So I'll switch through it, except to say that about half of US cancer patients receive radiation treatment, most with an external X-ray beam. So viewed one way, right, this radiation safety it's professionalized, it's ubiquitous, it's in every hospital in the country. It is, in fact, very well regulated. And proton therapy is just another kind of external beam radiation therapy. As you heard from Dr. Haas-Kogan, it's particularly advantageous type, but it's still an external beam radiation therapy. And so there's nothing particularly new from that standpoint. It's widely recognized as the most effective for the reasons that you heard. What do you want to do when you're treating tumors is you want to deliver a lethal dose to the tumor and minimize or normal tissue injury. And so this is the physicists talk about why it is instead of the lovely picture from the physician. But it's basically this, what you're looking at here is depth. So this is depth in patient. So this 0 point, I don't know if you all can see my pointer, but the 0 point is skin and then traveling into the patient in depth. And then this is relative dose. And so this gray is X-rays, when you hear radiation treatment, you're pretty much, it's X-ray treatment. And so they do exactly what we know they do, right? You go to the dentist and you shine an X-ray source here and put a detector here, and the denser tissue, like your teeth, absorb more X-rays and cast a shadow over here. And so it's not a change when we treat tumors with radiation therapy. That the difference for an X-ray is that they're going to go all the way through just like they always do. The fundamental physical properties don't change at all. But now you want to deliver a killing dose to something inside, but they're still traveling through the whole body. And so that's the thing that we try to mitigate with proton therapy, which behave completely differently. So here's a corresponding proton going through. And you see that we can control but controlling the energy of the beam, it turns out, but we control where the dose is deposited in this very narrow area, which we can drive to the tumor. And so we can put all the dose in the tumor and not go all the way through. And in fact, a little bit comes through on one side and basically nothing out the back. So very different from the X-rays as far as getting out of the patient and how much of the dose goes to the tumor, but pretty much the same or in fact, better from a radiation safety standpoint, viewed one way, because the protons are not exiting. So I'll skip through the pictures. This is just showing you that in a form in a patient, you can see the X-ray beam here going all the way through, whereas the proton beam is stopping. This is a prostate cancer patient. Oops, somehow my okay, and this is also said just a few moments ago, but many cancers are treated, and proton therapy has been substantially on the rise, both in our country and in the world. We're averaging a lot of patients. The proton therapy community, right, is averaging about 15,000 patients annually now, about 10% of which are pediatric. It was in part pioneered for pediatric patients. The original approvals came from pediatrics because it's particularly important not to give dose to the healthy tissues for pediatric patients, because it actually incurs a higher probability of tumors later in life. And all of this can be found. I put these places where you can link and read about it if you're interested throughout my talk. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what a proton center looks like. And so you saw the lovely pictures of the potential center that Dana-Farber is proposing. I decided to use Loma Linda, which is in California, but it was the first US-based hospital center. Actually, one of the first centers is right by you all at Harvard Mass General, but they used the physics department, nuclear physics accelerator for years. So this was, Loma Linda is really the first one at a hospital. But they all have exactly the commonalities I'm going to show you. There's a main accelerator, can be a synchrotron or a cyclotron, doesn't matter. It produces a beam of protons that are sent down some kind of beam line, right? So some kind of beam line that looks like this. It's a lot of control magnets and an evacuated beam pipe. And then the beam traveling down that beam line is then driven to treatment rooms where the patients are treated. So there's a patient couch, and the beam can be delivered on something called a gantry that goes around the patient. In this case, Loma Linda has a few of these, and they have even a fixed beam line that looks a little bit different. The beam doesn't go around the patient. So that's kind of what your center will look like. And so just to get to the gist of why I'm here to help, I think, help the city and the town understand what some of the safety implications are of having a site like this. And they're really can be completely mitigated. And as I said, it's standardized and formalized and regulated all around the country, not only for proton therapy, but for all radiation therapy. But let me talk you through it. So the radiation is produced by the accelerator, and the radiation is delivered to the patient. When we turn the accelerator off, there is no longer a radiation source. So that's very different from something like a nuclear power plant, where the radiation source is continuous and you can't turn it off. We just turn the beam off and there is no longer a source of it. And so we have internal machine controls to avoid non-patient exposure. And the clinic personnel, who are the most, other than the patients, the people most around the beam, they wear personal dosimetry to monitor their dose. And so now there are, thousands of people who work in radiation therapy clinics who've been monitored for years. And so this is, again, regulation standards, and they get very low doses. And I'll show you some numbers in a moment. So anyway, there's the radiation produced by the accelerator, but there is another kind of radiation, and that is the residual radiation from activated equipment. So when the beam or it interacts with, for instance, those vacuum lines that I showed you pictures of in the beam delivery system of the accelerator, some of those metals can become activated. And so this is the only radiation that's there at all when the accelerator's turned off. So we turn off the accelerator, there's nothing, but there is a little bit of activated equipment. This is low level and short-lived, but it's an issue for people who work directly on the machine. If they have to touch those pipes, they need to know that it's there. They have to be monitored, et cetera. And so policies will be in place for them. And then there's radiations that's generated by interactions in the patient's or the equipment while the beam is on. So while the beam is on, the main beam, of course, is being delivered to the patient to kill the tumor, but when the beam interacts with the patient, there's other kinds of radiation generated. And this is what we shield against. This is really the dominant thing, and it's actually neutrons. So let me just set the stage for shielding those. So first, let me say that there's many industrial uses of radiation out there. There's food sterilization. All of your spices have probably been radiated. Smoke detectors, we send radiation goes out of the detector. If it bounces back in and it's detected in your smoke detector, the alarm goes off. Non-destructive testing of all kinds of materials, electrical power for satellites, cargo screening. Actually, the semiconductor device fabrication industry is a fairly relatively small overall, but a largish of these users I'm listing. Emergency lighting, mining, but the largest by far of all of these is medical applications. So let me give you a feeling for that. This is all of the background radiation that we experience on a daily experience. Sorry, did I mention it's like 1 a.m. in Cape Town? Anyway, here's all of our sources. There's radon gas from the ground, and depending on where you live in the country, you may have more or less of this. Massachusetts isn't so bad, but there's radon gas. There's rocks, and this is granite countertops have a little bit of radiation. The human body and food, bananas have a little bit of radiation. Radiation is coming down to us from cosmic rays in space. All of these things are natural radiation just around us. And then about 18% of what we receive from background comes from artificial sources. So these are man-made sources. And if you take this 18% and look at it, this big green part of the pie, right, is medical, medical and of all kinds. And then there's a little bit from nuclear power and residual left over from weapons testing, and then other other sources. And like I said, this is largely the semiconductor industry, actually. So medical is the big piece here. So let's take a look at that. Oh, let me point out one thing. The annual total, keep this number, 3.2 millisieverts. Total, 2.6 of which is from all of these natural sources. So this 3.2 is your annual total of background radiation. So you'll see why I want you to remember that number in a moment. So let's look at those medical procedures. Here's your chest X-ray, a pelvis X-ray, a mammogram, which is just a breast X-ray, abdominal computed tomography, so that's 3-dimensional X-ray, or a PET scan, a positron emission tomography. All of these are very standard medical procedures that we've all maybe had at least a few of these. And so if you look at this millisievert number, you can't even hardly see your chest X-ray, but a mammogram is getting up, close to 1. And remember I said you're getting a little, remember back here, this number I told you memorize this 3.2 from all of your background radiation. So here's that 1. And then a CT is up at 10. So a CT image is way above your background. So why is this important? It's important because the standard proton shielding design is for 2 millisieverts a year for the general public, 2. So it's below background, way below a CT, and slightly above a mammogram, right? And that's what we bring it down to. Actually, we bring it down to less generally, but this is the goal. So this is more doses to give you a feeling for this. The annual public dose limit from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is 100 millisieverts per year. And we design in the proton therapy community, again, we design for a factor 50 lower than actually what the NRC allows for the public dose. And just to put it in perspective one more time, a transatlantic flight is 2.5. So we're designing for lower than a standard transatlantic flight where those cosmic rays are beaming down and we're not protected from the atmosphere. So that hopefully gives you a feeling where we are in the larger scope of radiation delivered to the public. How do we manage to do that? How do we manage to design that building and shield against it? The big goals in radiation shielding, our friends are time, distance, and shielding. So distance is just the further you are from a source. If you think about if there's a source here and it's spreading out, kind of like you turn on your flashlight and it makes a cone of light. If you get further away, you get a smaller density of that light. So if you're, yeah, so distance helps, but shielding is the dominant thing. You just put material in between you or the public and the radiation source. And so the shielding, dominant shielding for proton therapy centers is concrete. And you can see why in this slide here, these are different kinds of ionizing radiation. By far, the important kind of radiation for a proton therapy center shielding is neutrons. And neutrons are generated when the proton beam hits the patient or hits some of the other elements in the machine. And so the neutrons will travel through many things, but they don't travel well through water and concrete or et cetera, as things like plastic. Basically, this kind of mid-mass absorbing material is the way that we shield against neutrons. And so concrete shielding for proton centers, here's some pictures for you. This is Manchester. I just picked one that we worked on, but you can see all of this concrete mass coming in here. All of that's concrete. And I picked this one so that there's this nice picture while they're constructing, so you can see how much concrete is actually put into a proton therapy center. Shielding accounts for about 15% of the construction costs of a proton facility. It's really all of this concrete, all the rebar, all the conduits, everything going through that is quite the design and quite costly. Conventional concrete forming is the norm. And I say conventional concrete forming because the concrete actually is slightly different, and I'll talk about that. You can also shield for the floors and the water below. So some centers we've done, like Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York or the UCLH in London, real estate's so expensive that they want to have many stories above their proton center. UPenn also does. And so sometimes you have to shield a lot for the roof because there's going to be public above it. And sometimes not, because there's just sky above it and it's different. Every site is a custom site, but you can also shield for the water level. And I thought I'd show you a picture of Miami where we, K&N Physics, did shielding also for their groundwater, because it sits 1 foot below our shielding for the city. So this was quite important to that site, how to do that. So there's a rigorous regulatory and inspection process once the shielding design is done. And because of this, the very rigorous process, the awareness, the careful customized calculations, there has never been a radiation safety incident at a proton center. So I'll just tell you a couple words about that process and let you stop listening to me. We do many things, and which I would hope to do for this site. We would specify the composition of the concrete to be used. And so it's regular concrete, but typically it's slightly denser. And what we want to make sure is what's used to calculate the shielding for that center is actually what's delivered to the center. So this is not an extra cost. We look at local aggregates, but it is slightly denser, it's slightly different, and we need to ensure that that's what's used. So we actually test the trucks coming to the site, pour samples as the trucks are coming in, not every single truck, but random tests. Visual inspections of the construction site during construction to make sure that the shielding requirements are met. So this is the thickness of the walls, but it's also placement of conduits and any penetrations in the walls. A thorough radiation survey happens at machine start, not patient start, when they very first turn that machine on, to verify that what's calculated meets what actually is being delivered. What's calculated outside the walls, I'm talking about, actually meets what's being delivered outside and inside, any areas where the patient, where people will go, workers or the public, anybody like that. And this is actually part of what the site will need to get a certificate to run from the state or the federal agency. Actually, Massachusetts is an agreement state, as are most actually, with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So we actually will be applying, or you all, Dana-Farber, will be applying to the state for your license to run. But this radiation survey will be a part of it, as will regular subsequent ones after that. So survey means walking around with dosimetric measurements, climbing up on the roof with dosimetric measurements, testing the water, all of those things to make sure that it's still in keeping with what was planned. So this is all part of that. And then there will always be a designated radiation safety officer at the site who is submitting annual reports to keep that license up. So that's really what I have to tell you, other than to answer your questions. Thank you very much for listening to your physics lesson. And
Well,
I'm done.
Thank you very much for joining us at 1 a.m. local time, and appreciate both the physics lesson as well as all of the detail. That last bit where you were talking about sort of the approval process with the National Regulatory Commission. I assume, Wendy, that was that sort of back half of the timeline that you talked about is the commissioning. So that the actual building is basically substantially complete.
It's
Go ahead, Dr. Keppel.
Yeah, this part won't add time to what was shown. It's part of the standard construction and turn on process. The commissioning is really preparing for patient treatments. This is actually when the beam is first on, they're first commissioning the machine. These surveys will take place and right immediately. And then it will continue. It will continue, but a report must go. It'll be to the state because it's an agreement state with the federal authorities, but it will go to the state as part of the licensing to turn on. And so I'm sure that the people who've looked at the project know that they've got to do this. And the physics team, actually, I think there's somebody from Dana-Farber's physics on here. The physics team will have thought about this because they will ultimately have the designated radiation safety officer associated with the site, and will keep up this licensing.
Thank you. And Dr. Haskogan, you spoke earlier about how much more beneficial this is for the patients themselves because of your ability to control the dosage in the beam as it enters the body. It almost looks as though you dial it up upon reaching the tumor and then almost 3D paint the tumor itself and then turn it off. So talk a little bit about why that is so beneficial, both for pediatric patients, but also for other patients being prepped for a longer haul recovery.
Oh, I'm going to steal your description because that was so well said. That was just perfect. So that's exactly right. So much of the energy of the proton beam that we want to treat, that we want to use to kill the tumor cell, concentrates in the tumor. And let's just say, let's pretend it's a brain tumor, either an adult or a child. So much of the dose is concentrated in the tumor and kills the tumor, but the eyes and the mouth and the ears and the thinking part of the brain that we really don't want to damage gets very, very little radiation for using this technology. This is true, for example, there's so many examples of this, but let's just say for a stomach cancer or a pancreas cancer or a liver cancer, where let's say we want to treat the stomach cancer, but we don't want to harm the esophagus or harm the intestines or harm the kidneys. We're able to, as you say, dial it up and focus so much of the treating radiation, of the radiation that's going to kill the tumor in the tumor, and spare all the other structures around doses of radiation that might harm those tissues.
And is this a single visit dosage, or what does the standard treatment look like in terms of number of days, and what does that concentration look like?
So there's no standard approach. Sometimes it's a single day. Sometimes it's 3 days, 5 days. On average, it's about 20 days, 15 to 20 days. But on occasion, people have to come in for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And I'm sure you've heard of people who have radiation for breast cancer or prostate cancer that have to come in week after week. I will say that one reason we're so excited about the site is because the number of fractions or days of radiation that a patient has to come in over time has decreased dramatically. When I trained 25 years ago, people used to come in for 6, 7, 8 weeks sometimes. It's very hard to come in from far away, but a place like this could serve the entirety of the Commonwealth, because patients now, it's more routine that patients can come in and just get 1 treatment or 3 treatments or 5 treatments. So it's really, so we think that Westwood is a wonderful, wonderful location to treat many communities that can benefit from the location. And it's exactly because of the point that you make, that we now treat our cancer patients with fewer days of radiation.
Thank you. And then one last question for Dr. Keppel. As you were talking about the treatment itself and the facility, is there anything that, you know, we need to be considering in the construction phase you talked earlier about there's never been a safety concern or a safety issue that has happened, and over what time period? This is not exactly brand new technology, right? That is what's the time period? Because my understanding is that these facilities are often located in fairly densely populated areas.
In case Dr. Keppel, we'll give her another minute.
Sorry, yeah, I'm having a
There we
bit of a
go.
Wi-Fi
Hey,
issue.
Cynthia.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
you want- if
thank
you
you.
want to
Sorry,
take
I'm
it.
having a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue. That's why I videoed out on you. But if you can hear me, it's been over 30 years. The proton therapy has been utilized to treat patients in the US. I think FDA approval was in 1988, late 80s. And there were actually treatments leading to that FDA approval. So maybe 35 years. And with sometimes very large facilities. So this isn't just one treatment room. It's often many.
Thank you. Those are all the questions that I have this evening, but I will turn it over to Mary Ann and Michael to see if they have any additional questions.
I do, Rob. Thank you. And first of all, thank you, Attorney Bailey, Dr. Keppel, Dr. Haas-Kogan for those presentations. Very helpful. I also want to just mention for folks who may be hearing this for the first time that there were some presentations made at past meetings in June and July of 2021, June 7th and July 12th, 2021. So if you want to go back and look at those meetings, you'd get even more information. But one question I have for Dr. Keppel, you indicated that you had worked on the Mass General project, I assume some time ago, and I'm just wondering how you would expect the anticipated Dana-Farber facility to differ from the MGH facility. In other words, what competitive advantages, if any, would the Dana-Farber facility have?
I have a
compared to the
feeling
Mass General?
we may have lost Dr. Keppel. As
Well,
I'm
perhaps
looking.
someone on the team could answer that for me.
So Kevin Kriebel is our proton specialist. And so perhaps, Kevin, you might be able to jump on while Cynthia is joining.
I think I came back.
Perfect.
I just went in. And
Kevin was saved by the bell, Cynthia.
Unfortunately, though, I didn't hear the question. I'm so sorry as I was going in and out. Can you repeat, Kevin?
I'd be happy to repeat it, Dr. Keppel. It was my question. Very briefly, I saw listed on your list of projects, the Mass General project. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dr. Keppel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So my question is, as compared great, compared to the Mass General project that you have worked on, how would you expect the anticipated Dana-Farber facility to differ? What would the competitive advantage of this facility be with respect to Mass General? And perhaps we may need to. There you are.
I'm back. Yeah. I just turned the video because I was thinking that that's a little more bandwidth. But if you all can hear me, okay, I'll go ahead. Let's see, let me answer it a couple ways. One way is location, right? That the closer that people are to a proton center, the more likely they are to be able to take advantage of this treatment. And so, sometimes going into a big city can be a stumbling block for people, or, for people who may come from even farther, going into a big city may have very high hotel prices, for staying around for the weeks of their treatment and things like that. So it may provide more access both for local people as well as people coming in to visit. But the other thing is actually proton centers are really on the rise, and some places that have had proton centers for a while, like MD Anderson in Texas or the University of Florida Proton Therapy, they're building or have built in one case, building and have built more and more rooms because they're just getting more and more demand. And so you're also helping because Mass General is quite locked in. They're not going to be able to expand. And so you're providing access and rooms. They turn people away and turn them out to other states because they're overcrowded. So for all of these reasons, I think that it's certainly not a competition, right? There's it's providing access where access is not possible in some cases and perhaps just not a choice in others.
If I may follow up, would you expect the technology to be more advanced at a newer facility that's anticipated?
It will be. I can say that, Mass General is putting in one additional new room right now. They also are trying to expand. So, certainly than their existing site, absolutely. They're one of the first sites and did a lot of the heavy lifting, to be honest, to get the FDA approval. And so that's a beautiful legacy, and they have been trying to upgrade, but nonetheless, it's a decades with an S on the end of it, old proton site. It's the high end of medical care, but it's decades old. So this site will have things like of imaging, a much higher level of imaging that facilitates more accurate treatment planning. It will have an approved beam delivery with the scanning. And so, yes, it will be just by nature of being newer, and also, what Dana-Farber wants to do, it's going to be, a state-of-the-art facility for sure.
If I could ask one other question, and this is probably for the Dana-Farber team. Based on your due diligence and review of the market, if you will, and your understanding of your own patients, what are you expecting as far as the flow of patients through the facility if it were to open in Westwood?
So I will take a shot at that. And Nick, if there's anything you would like to add, what we are anticipating is a ramp up from 3 to 5 years to get us to a full operation. And we're anticipating 80 to 100 patients a day once we complete that ramp up. And that's assuming the 3 gantries.
Great, thank you. Is that 5 days a week, Doctor?
It is 5 days a week.
Thank you. I will yield the floor.
Thank you. So I have an important question. So Dr. Keppel was talking about access. So I guess I would start with the first question is, what percentage of your treatment is actually given to those who don't have good health insurance or can't afford to self-pay? What percentage would you say of the patients that you treat are in that category?
Nick, do you have that answer?
I believe that's a question for Dana-Farber.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, so fair question. And we don't, generally speaking, we treat the patient, not the insurance, right? So it doesn't, when you come in, you're a patient first. And generally speaking, cancer is a geriatric, more of a geriatric disease. So a lot of our patients have Medicare, and a lot of them are also on Medicaid. I would say anywhere between 30 and 40% of our patients are either on Medicare or Medicaid.
I'll just answer I'm sure the data are out there. I don't have them at my fingertips, but I'll tell you from personal experience, it is virtually never that I cannot or do not treat a patient because of for financial reasons.
But they have to go through a screening process before treatment, correct?
Well, we generally speaking, I wouldn't call it a screening. We ask their insurance to pre-authorize it because insurance companies, of course, require that. We never want a patient to get a bill personally. So we have a system in which we streamline that for the patient. Other places, actually, the patient has to do much more legwork. We have a team that helps with that so that we can get the patient's cancer treatment started as soon as possible, and we ensure that they never get a bill.
And I know you said 80 to 100, but I'm just, when I looked at Dr. Keppel's diagram, I think, and I don't have it because it wasn't part of our packet to look at or to go back to. So I'm wondering, Dr. Keppel, you said how many patients are treated annually at 40 facilities? Do you remember you had that slide up for us?
I did. I said 15,000.
And that's throughout 40 facilities, correct?
Around the world. Yes, that is not one facility or just
That's
the.
not just the US, that's the entire world.
Mhm.
And out of that, you said
Which
only
includes some facilities that are not high volume, that are, for instance, research facilities and things. So taking an average is, but yes, that's true.
and 10% of that you said were children?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
May I just add one comment just to related to your question, Mr. Walsh, and that was that the access issue is really about the fact that the need in the New England region is so far greater than what is available right now. Even with what we're able to, what we're proposing, there's still a need. So I just wanted to make sure that that's also clear. So just there's general access is really important as well for everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, I will look to the Q&A. I don't see any questions. If there are questions from anyone in attendance, feel free to put them into the Q&A and I will happily bring them forward to our guests. While we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, Dr. Housecogan, you talked about being at the Moonshot event today at the JFK Library, and the objective of that was to, I think it was by 2035, maybe cut in half the number of deaths from cancer. Talk about, though, the other half of that mathematical equation that actually makes this worth doing for you, which is the rise in incidence that would be treated with this type of facility.
Having just hung up with the Boston Globe reporter, I feel like I'm talking to her again. You asked questions very eloquently, so thank you for that. So of course, the incidence of cancer is rising, and in particular, there are particular cancers that are rising that we would love to be able to treat with safer modes of radiation, such as proton beam radiotherapy. And many have shown, in fact, some investigators that Dr. Keppel is close collaborators with at MGH, that in fact, when we don't have when the Commonwealth does not have access to safer modalities such as protons, ultimately the cost of care is higher because patients get side effects. They might even get chemotherapy or radiation-induced malignancies at a higher rate. So ultimately, this cutting-edge center is going to serve populations that don't really have access to, or many patients that at the moment don't have access to this cutting-edge technology. And second, to reduce the overall, not just cost of care, but also morbidity of cancer care, and that we want our adults and our pediatric, our children, our childhood patients, to live forever with as many side effects as possible. So the Proton Center is extraordinarily needed.
Having a family member who just underwent 10 days of proton therapy down at Moffitt, I hope that you are right, that it allows him to live a long life post-surgery. While we're waiting on other questions, though, I see Mr. Walsh has his hand raised again.
Thank you, Rob. I just had a question. So if the water in the concrete takes all of the radiation, what happens to the concrete over time? Does it, even if it has to be dismantled, does that have to be especially discarded?
So the concrete, let's see, continuing the physics lecture. So the neutrons are absorbed in the concrete and it doesn't damage the concrete in any way. But some of the material that concrete's made of, and this is why I was pointing out having a special mix is crucial. Some of the material will become radioactive in time. The concrete self-shields itself. So this is not an issue for the center while it's operational or after, as long as the concrete is fixed. But it is the case that if you need to remove a concrete center, a special removal process has to take place because you can't just jackhammer into that concrete and aerosolize that. But again, this is done. It's known, how to do this, and there are procedures. It's just, it is a special thing to take one apart because it's some small part of it does become radioactive in time. And this is in time, like 10, 20 years. And then it would also go away in much longer time. But if you want to, really jam it apart, you will have to follow a decommissioning procedure.
Thank you.
I see a question in the Q&A from Fran Fusco of 20 Pine Lane. She says, I know Dana-Farber is a nonprofit. Is there any financial gain to the town of Westwood? And that, Fran, is part of the community service agreement, the pilot agreement that we would be finalizing with Dana-Farber. So there will be a pilot benefit to the town. Can't disclose any more of that at the moment.
Rob, I have a follow-up question, if I may, for Dr. Husk-Hogan. I believe I recall, but please correct me if I'm wrong, from a prior presentation that you folks told us that about 80% of your pediatric patients would benefit from proton therapy and about 50% of your adult population, if I have that right. And I'm just curious, doctor, what are the typical types of cancer patients that would benefit from this? Are there certain types of common cancers that many folks are familiar with?
So it's a particularly insightful question, actually, because the kind of patients that get treated, for example, at Mass General are, I can tell you mostly what they are, but they are very specific and relatively characteristic of Mass General because they actually do not have the capacity to treat all the patients that may benefit. So, for example, locally, patients who get treated with proton beam radiotherapy are children. In fact, we send all of our children from Boston Children's and Dana-Farber, we send them over to Mass General to get treated, which is wonderful that we have such wonderful colleagues, but also very tough on families to have their care. All of you know how important very comprehensive care with a single team is, and this is so the care is very split up, which is suboptimal. But of course, we have wonderful colleagues that will take our children because this is so important for the pediatric population. But for example, there are women with breast cancer on the left side that is very close to the heart. And there are many investigations now that examine whether we can prevent even heart attacks in the future by using protons for left-sided breast cancer, because we can reduce the even low doses of radiation to the heart, which can accelerate heart attacks. So that's just one example of a cancer that we've all had experience with, sadly, either ourselves or amongst our loved ones. But patients with lung cancer, patients with liver cancer, patients with all forms of, or many forms of intestinal cancer or GI gastrointestinal cancer, with breast cancer, with head and neck cancer, with oral cancers, with sarcomas, and that's just to name a few.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay, I do not see any other questions from attendees. So with that, I would like to thank Wendy and Dr. Kogan and Cynthia, Dr. Keppel, and Dan. Thank you very much for very thoughtful, insightful presentation, allowing us, indulging our questions. And we will have more on this in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure and the honor is entirely ours.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, that concludes old business. So we are moving to the new business section of the program. And I believe we have some capital expenditures that we need to approve tonight. Is Chris, are you handling this? Is Pam here?
Pam is not.
So, Mr. Chair, Pam is not here. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So, happy to make the recommendation.
Thank you.
So as the board has previously voted a request for disbursement on capital, this is the second quarter request. This totals $740,750. We do this periodically, but we do ask the board for their support. The last request that we made was $2,128,750. It tends to be higher at the beginning of the fiscal year, and it tends to go down a little bit. But again, for the second quarter, $740,750, and this is for municipal and school, and some additional capital improvements. Happy to get into the details if you'd like with exactly what we're looking for.
And this has all been approved at town meeting, so I think this is just the disbursement aspect of this, correct?
That's all it is, yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions from Ms. LeBlanc Cummings or Mr. Walsh?
None.
I would entertain a motion.
All right, I move the select board approve the release of the second capital fiscal year 23 capital totaling $740,750 for the various departments contingent upon all procurement procedures and checklists are fulfilled.
I second that.
Okay, roll call. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay. Next up is a discussion of financial policy update. And we were given both the revised policies and the good news is things are not in great need of update. And I would ask that, Chris, you would take us through anything that is noteworthy in Pam's absence.
So there are several policies that the town has previously put together, and this is something that Pam previously mentioned at a prior select board meeting that she was going to be making a recommendation to update. So what you have before you is the draft for your review, and then the idea or the plan that we have is to come back to you at your October 11th meeting for a full discussion, and then hopefully a vote from the board. If you need more time, we can certainly push that vote off to a future meeting. Many of the changes that are being recommended are changes, for example, from board of selectmen to select board. Also from the title that Pam's position previously had, a finance director to assistant town administrator, finance director. But some of the other things that we're looking at are a little bit different. Looking to make a recommendation that we go through this process every 3 years, which I think is a significant change from the current status. Also looking to include some short-term as well as long-term debt issues. We also have some changes in the town's financial structures where prior to or after these policies were enacted, and that is the meals and hotel tax revenue. So that's now being included. And also really talk about staffing levels as far as funding and being able to pay. I think the most significant piece of the financial policies are really for the board is that we continue to recommend to use reoccurring revenue for reoccurring expenses and not to use one-time revenue for reoccurring expenses. I think that's something that's consistent. I think these policies are also what is helping the town maintain its AAA bond rating, because these are financial policies that we follow. Some of the other changes that we have being recommended is to include, for example, snow and ice. We didn't have snow and ice as part of this process. And we have some additional matters in the introduction to the policies, but then we can, if you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can go through all the policies if you like. You want me to go through the reserve policy and the
No, I think Pam's memos did a fantastic job of laying all of that out. I just wanted to hit the highlights for it. Obviously, we're not taking action on anything tonight, but I believe that Pam has provided a comprehensive look and a point of view on where our financial policies stand to date and the appropriate places for update. So we can take that for future consideration.
Yes, and just to add, I think one of the other significant is risk management and cybersecurity. Those are two additional recommendations or changes to the policies that are being made.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions from Marianne or Michael?
Yeah, I do have a question. And first of all, I'm just really thrilled that we're updating these policies, and I love the idea of doing it every 3 years going forward. And I think it provides for a lot of transparency. Regarding the cybersecurity, Chris, have we, I was curious, when we look at the risk management policy, which I think is adds a lot of good provisions regarding risk mitigation. Have we considered having cyber security insurance?
We have, and we also have policies in place regarding cybersecurity. We also
do have insurance.
Yes, through our IT director. We are also working with third parties as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's, Marianne, I think it's through Maya.
Yes.
Okay.
Insurance is through Maya. Yes.
Then maybe we should just list that in the list here of all of our insurance, just to make that clear. And that is a priority going forward.
Okay.
But I'm glad to know we have that. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only other thing, Rob, that policies are also updating the change in state law. We used to be able to have like general funds for certain things, and the state law changed and we have to separate the funds out. So I think that was the other key change as to why there had to be some changes in the financial policies.
Thank you, Michael. I think that was the first thing that they looked at was what changes, if any, had taken place that would necessitate change in our financial policies.
Yes.
Okay. So the next item up for discussion here is I'm sorry. Next item up for discussion is to review the process to appoint an interim town treasurer. And that would be until the annual town election on April 25th, 2023. Our longtime town treasurer, Jim Gavin, has submitted his resignation effective September 15th. And he has served for 20 years as our town treasurer. And we've been very, very fortunate in a number of bond offerings that we've gone out to fund so many different improvement projects in town. So I will turn it to Chris and Town Council Ahern to talk about what our options are for appointing an interim town treasurer.
So, Mr. Chair, it's a very similar process the board had with the elected collector. So the board can choose to appoint an interim until the election, as you stated. We can certainly recommend a person to the board. If the board would like us to conduct interviews, we could certainly do that as well. If the board has an idea of someone that they would like to appoint, I can certainly just have a conversation with the chair. We can go from that standpoint. We have some people internally, we've had some discussions. We have a name that's a well-respected name within the community. We have spoken to the individual. We do have some very positive feedback from that individual. We do have just one question for Mr. Galvin that we are just waiting to get answered, and then I can certainly bring back something to the board.
Okay. And then the process would be, we would do that potentially at our next meeting, or because I imagine we need to have someone signing checks between here and our next meeting? How would that
Yes,
work? in the
yes.
interim?
We do have, our assistant treasurer is a co-signer on all of our accounts. So she could certainly continue to sign if need be. But we are, again, looking, once we get some information from Mr. Galvin, we'll be able to provide the board with an idea. But the plan would be to come back to you at your next meeting on October 11th with that recommendation.
Any questions from Marianne or Michael on this particular topic?
Nope, I think that makes sense as a process. Thank you.
Yes, I'm okay with that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Thank you, Chris. Staying on the topic of finance, as we move to other old business, we have talked about a long-range financial planning committee here, and we would like to reconstitute that. It was done away with a few years back, and the purpose of that committee would be to focus on long-term financial issues, such as 5-year projections on revenue and expenditures, the preservation and building of reserve accounts, a process for sort of capital budgeting and planning around that, ensuring, we're managing debt properly, things that can be big contributors to costs like health insurance and benefit costs, the aforementioned financial policies that we just reviewed, impact on residential and commercial tax rates as different things become opportunities, and then other post-employment benefits other than pensions. Originally, that was comprised of representatives from a number of boards and committees, including the Select Board, the School Committee, the Economic Development Department, the Finance Commission, though they are not able to serve on this due to town charter regulations. The Planning Board, the Board of Assessors, the Tax Collector, and the aforementioned Town Treasurer. And then we would have participation from the administration in town and the school administration as well, and then have a couple of at-large community representatives. So I think we need to discuss the process for how we go ahead and constitute this, and come to some next steps to be able to bring this to the fore. So let's start with the composition of the committee. Other than FinCom, was there any representation that either of you felt may have been overlooked in this list? And if not, then I would, go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to FinCom because I do think it is very important that we have representation from FinCom on a long-range financial planning committee, which is how it worked when we last had it. And I think that's important because those are folks who are working all year on these issues. Now, I understand the issue in the charter, but it is an advisory committee, and I certainly will defer to town council. But I have a hard time accepting that we can't have representation by FinCom on it.
So I understand your position, and I think the best way that we can go about that is I don't think you have to appoint someone from FinCom, but FinCom can appoint someone to go and be at those meetings. Those are meetings that are open to individuals, and I think that's how we did it in the past, and I think it was very effective that way. So I don't disagree with your premise. I'm just trying to do it within the auspices of the charter as it sits right now. And we have a charter commission who's beginning its work and may have some recommendations for how we deal with that as well, moving forward.
Yeah, is the DPW not included in this for a reason? I think that's probably one of the bigger expenses that we run into year by year. So I'm just wondering, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
I believe that falls under the town administration, because I believe Chris would have representatives from various departments to be able to speak to specific issues. Is that right, Chris?
That is correct.
Okay. And then, Marianne, I agree that there needs to be a collaborative effort. We certainly don't want to have, competing boards with differing opinions on priorities and things like that. So I think, the way Pat is talking about it, I don't know that that will be totally satisfactory to FinCom either, because I believe that, not having a voting voice, or at least an ex officio voice to participate in discussion and having to be invited into discussion would be something that they would like. But at the same time, we're trying to work with the confines of the town charter the way it is today. And I would certainly encourage them to have one or more come to those meetings and be able to report back to FinCom. And then I think that we should be able to have some ongoing dialogue with them as part of the whole, long range planning process.
Agreed. And as Pat said, they're open meetings. So, my concern is that they be involved, that they have a voice, they can report back so that we've got some continuity. The other thing I wanted to mention for discussion is looking at the list of who was on it before it listed 2 at-large community representatives. Now, I realize that it's hard to get a large group of people to do anything, right, in general, but I do wonder if we might benefit from more at-large community representation. And I also was reading in our packet about the notion of having more of a financial planning, long-range planning summit, as opposed to these ongoing monthly meetings, to be perhaps thinking in those terms. I know we're talking about composition now. I don't want to jump the gun, Rob.
Well, no, that's okay, because actually my next question relates to the frequency, right? Because yes, it is a large group. Yes, many of those members that are listed are people who are busy with a number of other committees that they meet monthly or more frequently. And so given the long range nature of this, my recommendation on a frequency might be no more than quarterly, because the types of things that would be on, say, a capital planning list are not likely to change very frequently within quarter to quarter, meeting to meeting. But I wanted to put that out there as a conversation starter for the two of you.
Having served on it before, Rob, I agree. We met every month, sometimes more than that, but I think quarterly is probably a good way to start. And if we need to increase the frequency because something's come up, we can always do that. But I would say that a steady pace would be quarterly, and not necessarily the first Wednesday of the month, but pick a date and do it. And that may change every year depending on who the chair is and what their availability is on that certain day. But I think quarterly would be much easier to try to get people together, especially if you pick the 4 dates, way in advance to give people enough time to plan their schedules accordingly. So I think that would be probably the best way to at least put it back into the beginning stages and then go from there. You can always add, but you don't want to subtract.
Did you have any thoughts on Marianne's at-large number?
No, like everything else, I guess it just depends on if you have 2 and the 2 can't make it, then you have nobody. So if you have 4 and 2 can make it, great. If 4 can make it, even better. But at least it provides that flexibility depending upon who those members are.
And they don't have any special consideration, would they, Pat, with respect to a quorum?
No.
Depends on how they're appointed. If they're full voting members, they would. If they're ex officio, they would not.
I'm talking about the at-large folks, and so long as there's nothing that would say if we had 4 that 2 of them had to be present in order to constitute a quorum. It would be just subject to normal.
It's the normal. You got to have more than half be there of the full appointed voting members.
Very good. Well, I mean, Marianne, I think there's some merit to the idea of maybe 1 per precinct, but again, it's just sometimes so difficult to find willing people to participate. And as we expand that fairly lengthy list, I would entertain the idea, but I would want to hear from both of you as to whether or not you think that is a good place, or should we start with 2 and talk about expanding it at some future date?
I would.
Thank you, Pat. So if I would ask Chris, has there been anything new since our last meeting that would necessitate a fall town meeting?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then, given the fact that we need to be making a decision to cancel that prior to the 15th, I would first open the floor to discussion to my colleagues, and if we are in agreement that there is no need for a fall town meeting, then I would entertain a motion. I will open it to the two of you.
I don't have anything, Rob. If we don't need it, there's no reason to waste town resources to have a town meeting. So,
I agree.
okay. So I move the select board vote to cancel the 2022 fall town meeting and to order that notice of its decision with regard to such meeting be posted in accordance with Chapter 2, Section 6-1, the business session of the town meeting of the town charter.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Next up, we have a transfer of funds to
Mr. Chair,
Westwood.
excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm going to recuse myself, Mr. Chair, from this item. Thank you.
Understand. Thank you.
All right, Rob, before you go on, there is a question regarding the select board in the question and answer.
Thank you. I would ask that the person submitting the question enter their full name and their address.
Mr. Chairman, we can come back to it when that's entered.
She did. She typed in her information.
Okay.
Okay, it is from Nada Milisevich Fabrizio from 32 Webster Street. She says, pursuant to Chapter 3 of existing charter, the select board doesn't have the authority to appoint an assistant town administrator, and pursuant to Chapter 6 of the charter, the board may only appoint a quote town administrator.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that interpretation, but I will tell you that the discussion you had tonight was to appoint a town treasurer. That's Mr. Gavin's position. So it's not an assistant town administrator. It's just the town treasurer. And via the charter section, I think it's 5-3, it says if a vacancy occurs in the office of moderator, such vacancy shall be filled in accordance with the town charter, section 2-9-2. A vacancy in the office of selectman, town clerk, town treasurer, or town collector, tax collector, shall be filled in accordance with the provisions of the general laws. A vacancy, so that's that. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 40, calls for the select board. Let me see if I can summarize it. If the office of town treasurer, tax collector of taxes, town accountant, or auditor in a town having but one is vacant, any such officer, because of disability or absence, is unable to perform his duties, the selectmen may, in writing, signed by a majority of them, which shall be filed in the office of town clerk, appoint a temporary officer to hold such office and exercise the powers and perform the duties thereof until another duly elected or appointed person has been qualified according to the law. And then there's provisions if they don't take the appointment. So I would suggest that you are appointing you're in position to appoint a town treasurer by our charter and Massachusetts law.
Thank you. The question may be more directed at the finance director and HR director roles. So I'm curious as to.
Well, not all positions don't come from the charter. But where the charter speaks to positions, it controls. So you have the ability to appoint a town administrator. You also have the ability to appoint other positions. So not all positions come from the charter. And you have the ability to appoint temporary or acting, and you've authorized Chris to appoint acting town administrators in his absence. So I think you're acting within the scope of your authority as the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, sir. Okay,
Sorry,
I'm
Russ.
now recusing myself.
that's all right. As we do, we have a transfer of funds from Verizon per the contracts for the public access funding to Westwood Media Center. We have in the past negotiated payments with Comcast and the license agreements for funds to be received and transferred to Westwood Media Center, as we also have with Verizon. Per the agreement between the town and Westwood Media Center, the town agreed to transfer funds pursuant to Section 8, subsection 2 of Westwood Media Center agreement within 30 days of receipt. And so we have a number of receipts from Verizon that total $57,206.69. We received a PEG grant in the amount of $44,200, as well as the semi-annual payment of $13,006.69 for the period January 2022 through July 2022 per the previous contract. And so would entertain a motion to approve the transfer of the said funds from Verizon to Westwood Media Center.
I move the select board to approve the transfer of $57,206.69 from Verizon to Westwood Media Center pursuant to the license agreements for the Westwood Media Center signed by the select board.
And I will second out of necessity. Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. All right. And if someone would text Mary Ann so she can come back in.
Is that?
I'm back.
All right, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
are to appointments and reappointments. We have a number of vacancies on committee boards and committees that are posted on the town website, including Cemetery Commission, Commission on Disability, the Housing Partnership Fair Housing Commission, the Pedestrian and Bike Safety Committee, the Westwood Cultural Council, and the Westwood Environmental Action Committee. I believe Chris and Rich Adams and Sue Perry met with Fawad Matar, a resident seeking appointment to the Recreation Committee. Mr. Matar has an IT background and his daughters have taken advantage of Westwood Recreation programming. Mr. Matar attended a Recreation Committee meeting, and both the town staff and Recreation Commission are in favor of his appointment. So I would, are there any questions regarding Mr. Matar's qualifications?
None.
No.
Excellent. I would entertain a motion.
I move the select board to appoint Fuad Matar to the Recreation Commission with a term to expire on June 30th, 2025.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
And I would like to thank Tish for putting in the pronunciation in the.
And I would like to thank Mr. Matar for stepping up to serve. Okay, we now move on to approval of minutes. We have the August 16th regular minutes as well as the August 22nd regular minutes. Were there any changes from either one of you to the August 18th? Sorry, the eyes are getting a little soft now. August 18th meeting minutes.
No.
No changes.
Okay, motion
I
to
move the
approve.
select board approve the regular meeting minutes of the August 18th, 2022 select board as written.
I second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. And how about for the August 22nd? Any changes from either of you?
No.
I had none.
I move approval of the select board regular meeting minutes of August 22nd, 2022 as written.
Second.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So this concludes the open session of our meeting. I will ask if there are any comments from the public or press in attendance tonight. I see no questions pending in the, oh, there is a yes, but the person says owner and does not have their name nor their address identified. This is Paul Kelly from 107 Willard Circle. Mr. Kelly, do you have a question? We want to promote him to a panelist to ask the question.
David is a slow typer, but he's getting to it.
In the meantime, I'll address, there were some questions that came in from Ms. Kathy Wallace of 283 Farm Lane that I believe the chief addressed, but I think they came in after we had moved on from the discussion of fire staffing. Her question is, do you think 9 full-time fire staff in the day and 8 in the evening is enough? And how often are we below those minimum numbers? I believe, Ms. Wallace, you can talk to the chief about that. I believe you will see some of his responses to a recent set of questions regarding that. And he touched on it earlier. So that will be something that we're addressing as we go forward.
And Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for the question to be typed, just to expand on that a little bit, the chief also increases staffing on needed periods. So he increased staffing during COVID. He'll increase staffing as examples during inclement weather matters, and also when situations are happening in areas around us where our fire department may need to respond. So those are examples. Just because there's a 9 doesn't mean it's stated maximum is a 9.
Right. And actually, I'm wondering, Mr. Kelly, if I can save you some typing. Was that the question that you had? Did those relate to Ms. Wallace's questions? If yes, okay. Budget, time frame, neighbors were not aware there was no ambulance. Chris, you want to take that in for?
I don't know what he's referring to as no ambulance. We have paramedics on our staff. We have, I believe, 3 ambulance. We have 2 that are typically in operations. Chief Deckers is still in attendees if you'd like me to ask him to be moved.
Yeah, why don't we promote him to a panelist here, because I'm not sure I understand the question either. So Mr. Kelly, if you'd like to elaborate on that, that would be helpful. Chief, I don't know if you've been following the conversation. There's a question in the Q&A from Mr. Paul Kelly of 107 Willard Circle, but I'm not quite sure what the budget timeframe. Neighbors were not aware there was no ambulance. I don't really have a proper framing of that question for you, so I don't know if there's anything you can even speak to there.
Yeah, I think I can speak to it because I'm familiar with some of the concerns about that. One of the things that we did early on, we made engine 2 a paramedic engine. When I arrived in Westwood in 2017, we housed a spare ambulance down at Station 2 that would never respond to calls out of Station 2. All of our ambulances respond out of Station 1. So both engines now are ALS engines, meaning they're advanced life support engines, meaning they have paramedics on it that can do all the skills necessary to treat the patient. The only thing an engine cannot do is transport them to the hospital. But they get there, they start to initiate the care, then they transfer care over to the responding ambulance to bring the individual to the hospital. It's actually a quicker and faster treatment plan. Then you're not waiting for ambulances. You're not dropping staffing on our engines. So it actually works better for us. And the town invested a tremendous amount of money to get those engines to an ALS status. It's almost $100,000 per engine to do that. So we've made a tremendous investment into the way we do EMS care by putting paramedics on our engines. Hopefully that answers Mr. Kelly's concern.
I think he said, okay, great answer. So last question that I see in the Q&A is once again from Ms. Fran Fusco of 20 Pine Lane. She says, what needs to take place to focus greater emphasis on the beautification of Westwood's town centers to include holiday decorations, flags, banners, seasonal decorations?
Mr. Chairman, may I intercede at this point?
You may.
This is not something on your agenda tonight, so I would recommend that you take that up at a future date where it's properly posted on the agenda and people have notice of that discussion. It's a
Thank you.
legitimate question, but I just don't, I think you're potentially in violation of an open meeting law to have this discussion tonight without it being on the agenda.
Thank you very much. We will move that to a future meeting. And with that, and seeing no other questions, I'm sorry, hang on. Last question related to the solar is from, again, Mr. Kelly. Says post on solar canopies, large post bases coming out of ground. Again, don't really have the context for that. I know that the size of the canopies, the size of the posts and the concrete are such that they do not take up any additional parking spaces. Is the way it has been reported at other meetings. I would encourage Mr. Kelly to go ahead and watch the presentation that was given at the school committee, as there were a number of details provided in that meeting. And with that, I am going to take us to executive session. The Select Board will be going into executive session to discuss two issues, both pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union personnel. The board will not be returning to open session. I believe that we will.
Your next meeting is when, Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Next meeting is Tuesday, October 11th at 6 p.m. via Zoom, and we will adjourn from our executive session. So we will not be returning to executive session at this point.
So I move that the select board go into executive session for the aforementioned reasons.
I second that.
Roll call vote, Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just be clear, that is not to return to open session this evening, correct?
Correct. Not to return to open session.
And that will be Tuesday, October 11th. not
Tuesday,
Monday. Yeah.
Tuesday, October 11th. Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. See you guys in executive session.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.